What is up, YouTube? It is James here, and today we're going to be doing a little bit something different. We are going to be ranking the teams from the Wolfey Draft League. Now, I did want to make a tier list of all the teams, but the thing is, I think that when you rate the teams just on how they look, I don't think it's as interesting because, of course, a good coach can really utilize their team well and showcase ways that we haven't been able to see the team perform as well as maybe in theory. And I did want to make kind of more informed, detailed decisions about it based on how the coaches would be able to utilize their team. So this tier list is going to be based on the teams in general after the regular season has concluded. Right now, the regular season has concluded. Playoffs has not happened yet, so playoffs is still going to go on, but this is just going to be based on the strength of how I feel like each team was able to be crafted and performed well, and that is going to be helpful to the decision making. As of this note, all the matches that I've seen all of them up to week 6. Week 7 hasn't been uploaded by the time I'm recording this, so I'm recording this after week 7 results have finished, but the matches week 6 has been uploaded, but week 7 hasn't uploaded yet according to this timeline. So did want to give that context out there. I really thought that this draft league was pretty awesome, and might as well make some kind of cool content about it. I was going to react to some of the stuff. I got busy like usual, so thought I would at least do something, which I think this draft league has been an incredible experience to be a part of, and I really did think that I want to talk about some of the teams and give my perspective to it because it did also influence my team building, for example, and a bunch of others. So thought it'd be really cool to go over the teams now that we have seen how the coach has been able to utilize their teams throughout the weeks, and thought it would be pretty interesting in detail. So let us get into it. And I do want to say that, of course, all the teams can really showcase how differently a player can approach the game. Especially, I think one of the lessons I learned from SPL, especially, which is a draft could look bad on paper, but a good coach can really just swing things. And I think a lot of players in the SPL really thought that Joey had one of the worst teams, and I thought his draft was actually pretty good. I think he had a lot of different potential possibilities. He had mons that could catch VGC players off guard because he was using some of the more mythical Pokemon that were allowed in SPL, and he was able to dominate. He was able to get a top 4 performance, and I knew his draft was strong. I never counted him out. I did think it was more on the weaker side, but I thought it was maybe mid to upper tier levels. So that's what I felt this draft could perform. So wanted to wait and not make an initial video when the league happened at first, and also the fact that the players could change the teams throughout the week and make roster changes, because you were allowed to make roster changes up to week 4, which was kind of the midway point of the draft league. So I thought, just conclude at the end of the regular season. I think it makes a lot of sense. We get more details and see how the players end up making the changes and how those new changes performed, right? So these will be mainly the results of those completed teams. So let us get into it. What do I think was the weakest team of the Wolfey Draft League? I will be ranking them in order ranked, as well as I do want to say that for all the teams, we had 8 teams in the Wolfey Draft League. I do believe that all the teams were actually really strong for this draft league. That's what happens when you have a small amount of players. But of course, there are teams that are just going to be stronger than other teams. And I think it's mainly going to be based off how many options do they have, how many modes could they do, and how well the player can actually pilot the team. But mostly it'll be based on the team instead of the coach, but the coach has a bit of influence because if they were really able to showcase, wow, that team's able to perform super well, then I think that should be accounted towards. So let's go over the teams. The team that I put in last place is going to be Shady Penguinn's New York Yankees, and I think this draft we should definitely go over. So it made a lot of changes. Shady made a bunch of changes to his draft. His initial draft was very different. As you can see, he has the King Gambit, the Indity Female, the Hisuian Braviary, Sneasler, Mudsdale, Drifloon, Thwackey, Stantler, Houndoom, and Salamence. He made 6 changes to his draft throughout the weeks. And let me just say, you were only able to make up to 6. So I think this one specifically, it was very fragmented because he ended up changing a lot of his rosters towards the end. I believe week 4 he made the changes. So yes, he had to make a lot of differences, but I do think it did contribute, especially over time. So his initial draft was Ursaluna over Kingambit, the regular form, Scrafty over Sneasler, Orpworm over Mudsdale, and I wanted Orpworm personally. Like he got Orpworm over me. The Fungus over Thwacky, the Drifblim over Driftbloom, or Driftbloom for Driftbloom. Yeah. I think yes. And the Armarouge or Armarouge, because he got Armarouge again. So his initial draft was super hard Trick Room based, had a Tailwind potential option for a mix up, but the problem with his initial draft, it was really generally slow, and his Trick Room mode only, or his Tailwind mode only worked if he led Entity with Driftblim. And the problem with that is if you're leading Entity female, even if you go like a choice spec set, it is still pretty underwhelming in a lot of cases. So yes, I don't think it was the best Tailwind mode in general. It was really hard to really accomplish. You pretty much had to rely on weak armor, weakness policy Armarouge, and then your potential like Trick Room mode in general for this team to do well. And that's pretty linear, and you also only had like 2 different modes that you could really like set up towards, and both of them kind of still can get countered by the same things. Like for instance, in my week against Shady, like my Crocodile with Assault Vest was able to kind of handle both the weak armor weakness policy version as well as the Trick Room setup mode. So it felt like it was very linear. It didn't feel like it had really like super consistent plans into a bunch, and again, like it was pretty easy to prepare for as long as you kind of knew how to cover for both. And that's kind of why I think Shady really needed to change his draft, and he ended up making obviously a super large amount of changes, right? And I think his new draft ended up becoming much better. And of course, when you do change mons, you can only choose from the remaining mons of the draft. So he was going with like the scraps from the remaining that were undrafted, but I felt like he grabbed some pretty good mons, like Kingambit, for example. Kingambit was a mon I'm surprised they didn't go for in the initial draft, because I thought Kingambit, one of the big 3 steel types, fantastic, probably has several different options between sword stance, assault vest. You could run like life orb offense, assurance is really powerful in a lot of cases, and yeah, you could run like quite a few different sets I think on Kingambit, and I think it was a really powerful mom, which I was surprised to see undrafted, but Shady picking up Kingambit and really showcasing how powerful it could be later on after he drafted it. And then even though he has like this entity which kind of blocks the sucker punch option, you can always change the terrain with Thwacky, with the grassy terrain able to allow you to go for sucker punch. And I've used the combination of entity and like a Rillaboom before, having dual terrain at the 2022 World Championship. I was able to go for like follow me and attack with 1 slot, and then afterward get in like my Rillaboom and then go for like grassy glides and powerful attacks to clean up opponents. You could do the same thing here with sword stance Kingambit plus like follow me entity, and then bring out the Thwacky or the grassy terrain once the entity goes down after redirecting the attacks, and then you could go for like those priority sucker punches plus grassy glides, right? So I do think that's pretty strong here. Then you also have like the Hisuian Braviary and the Sneasler for the side spam mode that you do have access to, with really powerful expanding forces plus the Psychic Seed Unburden that you can take advantage of. You can also go with like Grassy Seed, Thwacky, plus the Sneasler depending on like the situation, so that could also be a pretty powerful option that he has there. You have to guess on which of the seeds that will be active. You also have the Mudsdale, which I think is a pretty effective Trick Room sweeper, especially with like access to Earthquake plus like the Hisuian Braviary, and that can be really powerful. You also have the Salamence that is definitely interesting, and I think Salamence is a cool mon, has Intimidate, has a bunch of different sets that could run. I think Salamence is great. I don't think we've really seen Salamence though, at least to the point that we are currently playing. Maybe he'll bring in week 7, but I do think it's a pretty strong mon for what it's worth. And then, you know, he has some stuff, like he has this Drifloon now. It does have the Tailwind and the Unburden boost from like the Grassy or Psychic Seed he could run. You could run the Stantler with the skill swap Intimidate option for the Define boost, as well as like Trick Room. And Houndoom, I don't think Houndoom really does anything. It wasn't even really doing anything, I think, initially in Shady's original draft. I remember the Houndoom clicking Willisp and I guess self Sucker Punch, and yeah, it didn't really do much afterwards. So I do think that Houndoom doesn't really accomplish much, and it hasn't really done anything from what the matches I've witnessed. So yeah, like I do think that Shady's team was a huge upgrade compared to his original draft, and I think he was able to play extremely well. As of the time that I am recording this, it was again up to week 6, and he was able to beat Wolf 2-0, which was a really impressive match where he was really able to make a really smart switch, showcasing how good double terrain could be by switching out the Fwacky or switching out the Entity into Fwacky to get grassy terrain, so he could have the damage of Earthquake, and that was a pretty massive for the King Gambit. So really powerful. The only problem is, again, I think he has some good mons. They're still a little bit fragmented with how they work, because you have like the King Gambit. There's not like a centerpiece, I think, for his team that could really like build towards for the most part. Like there's not one mon that like absolutely destroys a team on its own. And I do think that like Drifloon, I haven't seen it be used yet. I don't think it's that great. We haven't seen the Stantler really too much. Houndoom, I think, is pretty much not that amazing. So I do think that, again, kind of fragmented compared to like some of the other stronger drafts, and that is why I rank it as the weakest draft of the Wolfey Draft League. But I will say that Shady, I think ever since, because he was adapting to VGC Draft League and had a really rough time with his initial draft, but once he picked up his new draft, he was really able to challenge his opponents. Like the Uzi game, he was able to win. The Wolf game, very convincingly. And it was a pretty strong set, I know, against Joey. So I do think that Shady was able to learn over time and really get accustomed. I think he had a much better draft going into the final couple of weeks. And I really wish he had, like, you know, started this draft earlier with like maybe this kind of core, because it would have been really awesome to see like how he would have been able to handle it throughout the season instead of like just the later half. So that is Shady's draft. That's why, again, I have it as B. It's still a pretty solid draft, but the problem is, again, I think weaker compared to some of the other drafts that we'll see here. All right, so after Shady, who is going to be the 7th place? And again, I think I'm mostly ranking it based on team and not player nearly as much, but I do account towards some of it. And of course, like, how did they play their draft route? And I will say the next one might be a shocker to people. I think it will be a shocker to people, because the 7th place draft that I have is going to be Aaron's Melbourne Rotoms. And he might be thinking, wow, really? And yes, and I will explain. So let's look over Aaron's team. So Aaron's team, as you can see, is going to be Goldengo, Dundozo, Palmot, Galarian Weezing, Slacking, Yanma, Murkrow, Dugtrio, Toadscool, and Tatsugiri. So I do think that Aaron's team, and we've talked about this actually as well. We talked about it after the week 7 that I played against him. And if you don't know, Aaron's team is actually very similar to my SPL team, where I had Goldengo, Dundozo, and Tatsugiri as a really strong combination. I also had Prankster Tailwind, or not Prankster Tailwind, but Priority Tailwind with Fletchinder instead. But he ended up deferring with like the Galarian Weezing plus Slacking mode. He also has a Palmot. I tried to get Palmot in the original SPL Draft League, but I wasn't able to get it. But yeah, this draft now, the reason why I think it's probably one of the weakest ones is because even though it has several oppressive modes, right, by themselves, like Slacking plus Galarian Weezing can be really strong. Dundozo plus Tatsugiri can be really strong. Murkrow plus Goldengo can be really strong. I think they're all pretty strong, but the thing is, there's very limited options of what you could really do with these different modes. And one of the problems I had with my SPO draft is every time I want to do, oh, Dundozo Tatsugiri looks so good, then you have to account for all the ways that they could really like stop the Dundozo Tatsugiri mode, because they know it's coming. They know it's a draft league. You can actually prepare for this specific matchup because you know you're playing a Dundozo Tatsugiri, unlike regular VGC where you have to build a team that can handle all kinds of different matchups, right? You know you're facing a Dundozo Tatsugiri. You know you're facing a Galarian Weezing plus Slacking. And I think that mindset makes it a lot harder to actually set up these Pokemon as favorably as it would be for like a regular VGC setting. And I think that is going to be a very big problem for Aaron, which is because it's a bit linear with like the ways that the team is constructed, mainly because you have the Slacking plus Galarian Weezing. There's like a few ways to always play around this. You have like Ability Shield, of course, that's active that you can have as a held item, ways to shut down the Slacking through like Will-O-Wisp, stat drops, and more. Galarian Weezing, of course, great with abilities, but the thing is, it's not really like that important, I think, in this draft league compared to like standard VGC, because it's not like everyone's running like the same rain team or intimidate stuff with like everything else. It's like they have their own mons, so a lot of the, I think a lot of it comes more down to like the moves and the tech items they have more than the abilities themselves. So yeah, and of course if you need your ability, you could always just play ability shield. So I think it's a little bit tough to run this duo specifically, and that's why they were kind of rated low. I think they were a bit too low for what they were valued, and we saw like Aaron still able to dominate some games with Slacking plus Weezing, but I do think like it's a lot less effective than it is in like standard VGC. If you were playing like a Grand Challenge, Global Challenge, Stadium Ladder, PS Ladder, all those kinds of factors, right? And Dondozo Tatsugiri. The thing is, to run Dondozo Tatsugiri, there's so much that you have to think about how they're gonna play it. Do you run Unaware? Do you run the Water Veil? Do you run the Oblivious? Are you going to just run Standard Leftovers? Are you going to run a different item? Are you going to be able to counter all the ways that they could potentially prepare for Dondozo Tatsugiri? There are quite a few ways that I found, like in SPL. Wait, Dondozo's really hard to set up here because they could do stat dropping move. They could do a setup for crit scenario. They could set up like a bunch of different scenarios to like just punish the Dozo in general, which I found it to be a lot harder to use than in standard VGC. So I think Dondozo is just a lot weaker in VGC draft than people will give it credit for. Granted, it is still a headache to team build against, but I think it is a lot weaker and sounds better in theory than it is in actual practicality. And we saw this as well in my SPL. I didn't really use Dondozo Tatsugiri that much, and I don't even think Aaron went the Dondozo Tatsugiri mode that much. I think he didn't even bring it for a majority of his weeks. He might have brought like solo Tatsugiri quite a bit, or I think he might have also brought solo Dondozo one time, but otherwise he just, again, it's really hard to set it up specifically. And that's not including like without the haste stuff from like Dragonite, but there's like probably a lot of options that you can just cover for Dondozo Tatsugiri. And the thing is, his Golden Go, which is a pretty good mon, is kind of linear in this case because there's only like really ways he could set up. You do have redirection with Toadstool, I suppose, but we never saw Toadstool even being brought. You do have access to Choice Specs and Life Orb, Nasty Plot, but otherwise that's really it. It's also really hard to set up Nasty Plot on this team, by the way, because you have one really frail redirector, and otherwise like the Golden Go is exposed. You have Fake Out with Palmot, that's really it. Both of them are weak to ground. You have the Murkrow, Nekkra Tailwind, that's really it. It's like really hard to build a more defensive Golden Go mode, I think. So you kind of had to go offensive in a lot more cases and just had to rely on a good Terra type and just hope you get to be put into a good position with Golden Go to set up. But I think it's really hard to set up a Golden Go on Aaron's team. I think it had to be more offensive in most games. Like he was able to set up against Wolf, for example, with Nasty Plot, which I think was more of an exception, but across the board, like, yeah, I think it's really tough to set up Golden Go on this team specifically. And again, a lot more frailer pieces. So if you do spend time setting up, it better be worth getting those knockouts. And if you don't get those knockouts, yeah, it's a really difficult situation. Also, by this week of the league, like he brought like Doug Trio once. I don't think he brought Yanma or Toadstool at all, which kind of just took up spots. And that's kind of like the big expensive tax of having Dondozo plus Tatsugiri. So yeah, I just felt like he was mainly playing with like 7 mons, and if the Dondozo mode wasn't good, it felt like he had to go with like the Tailwind setup mode. Like there wasn't like really as much flexibility, I think, in Aaron's draft compared to other drafts. So that's why, like, I think Aaron's a phenomenal player and can definitely utilize. But the thing is, like, again, a lot of his draft kind of linear with like how it works, and a lot of the stuff you want to counter slacking with, like stat dropping moves, Will-O-Wisp stuff, also works with Dondozo against Dondozo. So yeah, I do think that this draft was just really hard. I think the fact that it really relied on duos specifically as well, that's kind of thing, like Dondozo with Geary, Golden Go with Murkrow or Palmot, and then slacking kind of pretty much needed Weezing, or otherwise it wasn't really like that great of a offensive mon. Like most of the offense also came from those specific mons, and if you aren't able to really set them up, it's like really tough to. And you kind of needed the other on the field, and if one of them went down, it kind of becomes useless, right? Like if you get rid of Galarian Weezing, the slacking is kind of useless on its own. If you get rid of like the Golden Go, the Murkrow Tailwind's a lot less effective across the board. So yeah, I think it was just really tough. Like it's really tough to set up for that specifically. and it was kind of, I think, easier, I think, for players to approach. I mean, it's still an annoying team to build for, but I do think like the Tailwind offense mode was pretty scripted in a lot of cases. Like there's some sets you could run specifically with Slacking. We saw Assault Vest, Life Orb. You could go Choice Band, Choice Scarf in some cases, but it's at the end of the day, it still felt like, oh, Slacking is doing what Slacking wants to do, right? Just attack realistically. And again, if Wheezing is going to do its thing, Palma pretty much runs the same coverage moves for the most part. And like, yeah, like it was just, I think, difficult mon to really like have a really more complex game plan theory, and kind of relied again more on like the Tailwind staple mode, I feel. So that's why I rank it in 7th. Again, I think Aaron's a phenomenal player, but I do think that this draft in general, compared to the other drafts, harder to really use effectively, just because it is more reliant on these duos and really tough to set up. Really tough to set up. So that's why I have Aaron at 7th place. Then we have the next one, which is going to be Nekkra Shoutcasting Sylveons. Is going to take the 6th place here on my Wolfey Draft League tier list. Now, this is a pretty interesting draft if we look at it, because if we look at this draft, there's actually like a lot of good stuff going for it, and like a lot of good offense that you have going for it. You have the Garchomp, Tyranitar, Clefable, Fletchinder, Gyarados, Cypher, Rotom, Mo, Hitmontop, Halcyon, now Creamy. The base stat total of this team is absolutely insane. Like it really is. Now you might be wondering, why am I ranking it so low? And like Nekkra actually did have some pretty good wins in general. The problem I think with this draft, and again, it's more of I'm rating this draft specifically compared to just playing wise, is I do think this draft probably does have some flexibility. The main problem I have with this draft, and I think this is a big weakness I think in Draft League in general, if you kind of build towards this, is if you look at the typings. So Garchomp, 4 times weak to ice. Tyranitar, 4 times weak to fighting. Fletchinder, 4 times weak to rock. Gyarados, 4 times weak to electric. Cypher, 4 times weak to rock. You kind of see what I'm saying, where 5 of your mons have a 4 times weakness. That's half your draft, and those are the heavy hitters too. Like your heavy, I guess, other than Fletchinder, the other mons are your heavy hitters, and you have so many 4 times weaknesses, which is a problem. Now, the reason this is a problem is because in draft, you are going to be countering this specific team. So you can run a bunch of coverage moves to cover for it. And you can only terastallize once per game. So you could terastallize 1 out of their 4 times weakness, but you can't go for multiple. And I felt like I was able to really take advantage of this when I played against Nekkra, because I was able to have like several options. Like I had several rock coverage moves. I had ice coverage. I had electric coverage. I had fighting coverage. I made sure I was able to cover like all those 4 times weaknesses. And even for the non 4 times weaknesses, then I just had like regular moves that could be fine against, right? But when you have so many of your heavy hitters reliant on these that have these 4x weaknesses, like there's a reason why they have really powerful stats, but they're counterable because they have those 4x weaknesses, right? And I felt because I was able to prepare for the team, I was able to have tech moves specifically for these mons in general that allows you to play well into this kind of draft, right? So I think that's like the big criticism I have on Nekkra's draft, is literally the 4 times weaknesses stacked against each other. I think the mons would be really good in general, in a general VGC setting, but the problem is when it comes to draft, you can really just prepare, I think, for the 4 times weaknesses and have those techs, which I think this team is very susceptible to. I do think I do like some of what this draft can do. There's a lot of different options you do have, of course. I think it's more flexible. You have like several sets you can run. We saw Special Garchomp 1 week. Tyranitar, you could run a bunch of different sets. Clefable is a definitely unpredictable Pokemon because you do have like offensive coverage that you can run on Clefable. Just standard follow me support, of course, is really good. You have a Tailwind offense mode. You have Gyarados that could be like Dragon Dance, offensive, Assault Vest, Thunder Wave, Taunt Spam, Cypher with Tailwind, like really good coverage in general. Rotom, Mo, definitely you have a Discharge, Earthquake combination, him on top, Intimidate, or you could go like a more offensive mode or support coaching mode, which works with a lot of the team. Houndstone, which Sand Rush, of course, complemented, and then now Creamy with Decorate. Like, I think the draft is pretty solid across the board, but the problem, again, the big one that's just why I rank it lower is going to be those 4 times weaknesses. I think really do kind of hurt this draft, like having that many. If it was like 3 of the main mons, I think it's kind of like less a problem, but when you have 5 mons and like half of those mons you're probably bringing each week at least is going to have 3 weakness or 3-4 times super effective weaknesses, I think it's pretty hard to play with because you got to cover those options especially. And yeah, that's why I think, again, that's why I put Nekkra as the next one. I think it's more flexible than Aaron's draft in general because it has like a bunch of different things you can do with this. Like we saw some really creative sets, as I mentioned before. Like we saw this Cosmic Power Clefable that she brought against me with the Alcremie and the Psych Up. And then like there's other offensive modes that she was able to take throughout her weeks. So again, I think it's more flexible and does have those options. Yeah, I also have like 2 Intimidate mods, which is fantastic. But these 4 times weaknesses, I think, just held draft back, like having too many of them. So that's why I put Nekkra's draft in the 6th place. Now let's get into the 5th place, which is going to be TheUziGunner and his Thunderclap Titans is going to be my 5th place draft tier. So let's look at Uzi's team, who is going to be running the Dragapult, Whimsicott, Piloswine, Araquanid, Hisuian Typhlosion, Delayed, Berserker, Toxtricity, Dunsparce, and Malamar. And he made 2 changes throughout the league, which is going to be, he swapped out his Gliscor initially for Piloswine, and he swapped out his Skiploom for Dunsparce. And I don't even think we've seen the Dunsparce, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he brought it against week 7. I don't think he did, but yeah, this is his draft, and I think it's actually pretty good because he has like quite a few different modes. I think he has like a lot of great mons in general, which I think I'm a huge fan of. Dragapult, Whimsicott, some of the fastest Pokemon in the format. I think he has a Frisk Typhlosion, which is incredible because you have to threaten the Sunny Day plus the Eruption, but also the Frisk just being able to find out the items, I think is really incredible. And then he also has like this somewhat tricker mode where he has the Gallade, the Araquanid, the Berserker with Fake Out. Toxtricity can take advantage of Tailwind or the Trick Room, so can Gallade. So he has like a lot of mons that I think can be pretty flexible in a lot of cases. He has pretty much a lot of good tools. Tailwind priority, Fake Outs with Berserker. He has some decent coverage with typings, really fast offensive, natural speed with the Dragapult. I do think that Uzi's draft was actually just generally pretty solid for what it was worth. And personally for me, it was the hardest draft that I had building wise, because this one I struggled a lot to build into this draft because I needed a way to make sure that I was able to play against Typhlosion as well as the Tricker mode. So I do think that those 2 modes are pretty oppressive for what they are, and yeah, there is quite a bit that Uzi could have done here with his draft, especially like he did bring some pretty interesting techs I think throughout. Like we saw the Malamar being brought, able to Topsy-Turvy the Dundozo. We saw stuff like Choice Scarf Gallade one week, and we've also seen like the Focus Sash Hisuian Typhlosion. The Dragapult's been pretty much offensive the entire week, but we've also seen some like Will-O-Wisp ones. Araquanid, we've seen like max speed Araquanid to like min speed. So yeah, I think like Uzi draft doesn't have like a glaring weakness. The only thing is it maybe kind of relies on one mode or the other, but you could definitely go with like a dual mode in one week, like a Tailwind plus a Tricker mode, and it can pay off. Maybe it doesn't have the best mons that can switch, because the thing is none of his mons really tank attacks well, so that's probably the downside. But I do think that Uzi has a lot of options. He doesn't have like an initial glaring weakness other than that like awkward speed thing that could happen, but across the board I do think like it's a generally solid team for what it's worth. Has a lot of different options, has again different modes that could complement each other really well, can be very unpredictable in some cases. Like he could run Tricker and Whimsicott one week with Gallade, and or just go with like Tailwind offense again, that's Scarf Gallade, super threatening. Like yeah, I think he had like a really good amount of offense that he can do with his draft, and I think it definitely was a powerful one, and he was able to really showcase well, especially like the first couple of weeks that with this draft, especially because he was able to do really well in those. So that's why I rank Uzi's as my 5th place over Nekkra's. Again, I think Nekkra's again is that 4 times weakness, where as we can see from Uzi's team, Doesn't have any of like that 4x weakness problem other than of course toxicity, but like one Pokemon is fine. I guess Malamar with bug, but it's not like that big of a deal. I think the only downsides I think to make this draft weak is Malamar seems like a very niche mon that wasn't being brought at times. Same with Piloswine and Dunsparce. And I feel like Berserker could have been brought more because I think Berserker is actually like a really good mon. But yeah, I think that was kind of the weakness here where like these three specifically. I don't think Dunsparce was brought to a match if I'm not mistaken, and yeah, Malamar Piloswine not the best, but across the board I felt like his modes he could have gone with like a lot of different ways he could have ran at 7. So yeah, that's why I put Uzi in 5th. So now we get into the A tier. I think the A tier is going to be interesting. It's going to consist of 2 teams, and again, it's funny that these are the 4 players who are in the playoffs, but I do think that these are the 4 strongest teams in the draft league, especially if like let's say even without the regular season, I probably would say these are probably the 4 top ones, especially after watching the matches for a few weeks. So for me, the next one going to be 4th place is going to be Mount's team for 4th place. And again, playoffs has not happened yet, so it has not happened yet, so Mount could beat me and like it would still probably be my rating in general with like how it's gone. So yeah, like I haven't even played Mount for the playoffs yet. I do play Mount for playoffs, but yes, or at this time again we haven't played the match yet, but yeah, Mount's team is going to be my 4th place here. And Mount was very interesting. He's the winner of SPL and he struggled a lot and had to make all his transactions, so he kept switching back and forth. And yeah, like his initial draft had Raichu over the Electivire, he had Exeggutor over Vileplume, he had Centrant over the Skiploom, which I think also got traded at one point. Torkoal ended up becoming a Masquerada. He got rid of his Sun mode to get rid of Skiploom and Vileplume for Inteleon and Toxapex. Yeah, there was a lot of trading on Mount's side, but I do think that his final build ended up becoming really strong, and the final weeks of this draft, absolutely killer run, absolutely killer run. A close set against Wolf, was able to win against Shady, into a win against Joey and Aaron back to back. Like yeah, he was on an absolute tear, I think, and I do think his draft is pretty unique with how it ended up. So he doesn't have Weather anymore. He got rid of his Torkoal and kind of leaned towards his more faster mode here because he has a lot of Pokemon in that interesting middle speed tier where they're flexible both in Trick Room and in the Tailwind. So he has stuff like Masquerada plus Inteleon, really fast offensive mons in general that just outspeed a natural part of like most of the format. And then he has like this Tailwind Prankster Illumise, which is super disruptive, has access to fake tiers as well, can be blown up with like Blood Moon as well, or Rangoon can also go with like Trick Room Instruct and setup mode. Scraggy, which we were able to see do well against Wolf, has the fake out, the coaching access, like it's pretty strong mon. Electivire with Follow Me redirection, or could just play offensive physically or specially. Blaziken, which is an interesting mon, could be a setup sweeper, could just be like a Baton Pass, could be a setup. There's a lot you could do. Caparacha, I'm not convinced by this mon. I'm still not convinced by this mon. I don't think I've seen Caparacha do anything. I mean, that's like the one slacker. It does give a steel type, but like this mon has not done much from what I've seen. And then Toxapex, which was actually important against Aaron. It does, I think Toxapex is actually decent. The poison with the Toxic Spice, the Toxic, Wide Guard, Support, Haze, I think is pretty good. So I don't think this is a bad mon in general. But I do think that this draft is actually pretty strong after all like the first couple of rounds that Mount has kind of suffered. I think he pretty much ended with a pretty strong draft. The only thing that I'd probably argue is the draft is probably like more leans towards a faster mode than like the slower mode. And Blood Moon Ursaluna, it's not like an amazing centerpiece compared to some of the other mons in the draft where you could centerize. Like Blood Moon Ursaluna can sweep teams on its own in some cases, but it's like a little bit harder to position. So I do think that otherwise it's like hard to find like a central core piece to sweep teams with, like you can with like Life or Terra Nova Hyper Voice next to Illumise and of course a Rangoon, but otherwise like not too much. I think that's obvious right off the bat, but I like a lot of his speed tiers. His speed tiers are generally pretty fast, and he does have like the Rangoon and the Trick Room stuff if necessary. So I do think that this is a very solid draft in general. Like I really do. The reason I think it's probably weaker some of the other drafts is, again, a little bit strange because of like, again, the speed tier's a little bit awkward. I don't think his trigger mode is nearly as solid as like his normal tailwind offense, or just generally straight out like even not bringing tailwind. Like I think his general mode a little bit, and then like Kaparaja, again, I don't think it's really carrying their weight. Scraggy, you really have to be going for some setup specifically, or maybe it's like a trick room mom, but otherwise, like, I think Illumise is good. I think we've seen the Meowscarada do a ton of work. Electivire has done amazing work against Joey and Aaron. So I think he has the tools, but I don't think it's like nearly as flexible as some of the other drafts that we're going to see. I think the 3 drafts that I rank on top are a little bit more flexible in the way that they can pilot, especially because I think they really work well with the other pieces that they have. I think, like, for instance, like he has like 3 starters. He could go for pledges, I suppose. But there's not really like a core centerpiece. Maybe you could do like Follow Me Electivire next to Blood Moon or Saluna. That could be super scary, but otherwise, like I wouldn't say there's like an obvious component here. So that's why I put Mounts as 4th right here. And then 3rd is going to be the team that will be joining the A tier Mount is going to be Wolf. And it's actually funny because I think a lot of players or not like the draft league players, but I remember like a lot of viewers and speculators were talking about like Wolf's draft and thinking it was like one of the weaker ones. I kind of disagree. And mainly it's because I'm not saying this because he just destroyed me 2-0. It was my only loss up to this point. I'm saying this because when you think about how Wolf plays the game, he's really good with information. And the fact that his draft has some really scary mons, it's not like a core centerpiece that he really has that can really destroy teams, but he has several ways of getting information, which is really big. So if we look at Wolf's team, Arcanine, Glamora, Trevenant, Noivern, Espafra, Venonat, Mamoswine, Hisuian Sliggoo, Primarina, and Hariyama. His only trade was Dedenne for Hisuian Sliggoo, which did win him a week. Dedenne was actually kind of a threat to my team, so I'm very happy to see that gone if I somehow make it to playoffs and Wolf also makes it to playoffs or into finals. But because Dedenne was actually a threat to my team, I'm very, very weak. But I do think that Wolf's draft in general, like, again, not a really core centerpiece that you can really identify as like, oh, this mon can just win, right? I think in some cases you can. Mamoswine's a really good offensive piece, and so is Primarina, but there's nothing that screams, oh, he easily can just win with this mon. So I think that's like one of the, you know, small slight setbacks with this team. But again, he has 3 Pokemon with potential frisk, which is going to be the Spafra, the Noivern, and the Trevenant. And when Wolf gets information, especially in a best of 3 setting, close team sheet, like that gives you a huge amount to work with. You can make your plans almost immediately. And I think like his mons do consist of generally strong options, right? Like we've seen him do work with the Venonat, with Sleep Powder, Mamoswine and Primarina, super big offensive threats. Hariyama, of course, can have nice fake out support and can take advantage of the Trick Room set up by Trevenant or Spafra. He also does have like some different modes, like he could do like a Spafra Illumina Crash with the Noivern if he wants to, or Glamora. There are quite a few things I think Wolf can do with this team that make it really effective. So he has really good defensive synergy tools with like Arcanine, Trevenant, and Primarina. He has pretty bulky mons, high HP down to Mamoswine, as well as the Hariyama. He has a Toxic Spike Glamora you always have to worry about. He has redirection with the Venonat. Hisuian Sliggoo is a nice steel type, which actually has some pretty decent stats for what it's worth. Spafra can be very tricky because speed boost of Spafra can be very scary. Baton Pass, screens, Trick Room, a lot of things that Spafra can do. So I do think that this draft like has different points of speed control, has some pretty good general mons. The only thing it's missing is like a core centerpiece, I think, to really like glue it together. Like if he got like one of the top tier mons, obviously it would have been effective. But I think that, again, it's not obvious on paper, but I think like the options it does have really fit well with Wolf's playstyle. And I do think that this draft is just super strong because it does have, like, again, multiple forms of speed control that you can do. And yeah, I think it's really good. The only downsides I think to the draft are like his initial speed is like as fast as him on his Noivern, then he has to kind of rely on his Spafra and Arcanine. Then everything else is kind of slow. I guess Glamora and Mamoswine is kind of middling, but like otherwise then it's 4 slow mons, which I think is a big one. And that's probably like those are the two main gripes that I have with the team. Again, no super big centerpiece, as well as like the kind of more favor towards, I think, the slower side, but definitely a bit flexible. Like I think Wolf's been able to showcase like a lot of like cool techs. Don't even get me started on the Glamora, but yeah, I think overall his team super strong, super underrated, I think, by like a bunch of people who like first saw their draft and were rating the teams. I think this team is really strong and worthy of third place in my tier list. In my tier list, my opinions. So that is Wolf's. Then we have second place, and this is going to be the S tier category. And I'm not, again, I literally am recording this before the playoffs begin, so we're in top 4. This is not an indicator of who wins. I'm not ranking this based on how well they did. I am ranking this on all the information I have after week 7. And again, my opinions were formed after watching all of these teams in action by their coaches. So you might be wondering, who is going to be the second place and who's going to be first place? And I guess I can rank them both at the same time because it's kind of obvious. So for second place, I'm going to put, yeah, I think it's actually my draft. I think my draft is actually second. And then I think Joey's is first, actually. That is actually like how I would rank them. So let's go over my draft. I've already made a super big deep dive in my draft, so if you want to watch that, you can. But Annihilate, Alolan Ninetales, Kilowattrel, Crocodile, Cinderace, Blastoise, Hydrapple, Furret, Duosion, Reverum. I made no trades, and I am first seed of the draft league. My only loss was to Wolf. I've beaten every other player to date. So why am I ranking myself second then? The reason I'm ranking myself second is I think my draft is really good. I think the speed tiers are incredible because I have very generally good fast mons, right? Alolan Ninetales, Kilowattrel, and Cinderace are really good in the fast speed tier over base 100. Then I have good middling speed with Annihilate, Crocodile, Blastoise, Reverum, and I guess Furret, since Furret's in that speed tier. And then I'm fine with Trick Room as well with Duosion and Hydrapple. But I can take advantage of both like Tailwind and Trick Room. And I think my modes, like, they are pretty good at complementing each other because I have a lot of different tool sets. Like Blastoise can be a sweeper with Fake Out, or support with Fake Out like Life Dew, and a bunch of other cool moves like Haze, Fire with Redirection, and Frisk to give me information. Duosion has been a superstar actually for a 1-pointer, been able to get KOs itself with Psychic. Trick Room, of course, is really good here. Hydrapple, absolute beast of a monster. This mon is absolutely beautiful for what it can do. Can be really good as a Assault Vest, Bulkymon, or a offensive tank. Like, it's really good. Reverum, it's been able to sweep 1 week against Uzi, which was pretty big, and it isn't the best steel poison type, but it does really well for what I need it to do, so that's fine. And then like the other mons I haven't been able to use Annihilate, which is the only thing that I think kind of has hurts me, is I haven't really been able to like capitalize on my Annihilate, which is probably like the best mon in VGC Reg H draft, but I haven't been able to utilize it as well. I've been utilizing my other tools, but across the board, like Annihilate is still like a mon that you have to respect, right? Rage Fist, a bunch of different options that it has access to, can just win games on its own. Have Aurora Veil, Weather Control, Tailwind support, Intimidate, or just like offensive sweepers in general. I think overall this team is fantastic. The only reason I'd probably say it is second place and not first is I don't think it has like, oh, this is the obvious way I can like, I don't have like a really oppressive mode, right? And I think that's kind of like the thing here, and why like me and Wolf are like, again, below Joey in my tier list, is because I don't have that immediate oppressive mode, right? I have really good tools in general, but it's not like I have one mode that just like auto wins the game generally, right? I usually have to craft and spend quite a bit in order to like find a winning line, while I think some teams like have a mode that can like just super threaten, which I think Joey has, but I don't think like any of the other competitors really have as much as Joey, because Joey has this like really offensive rain team and has like several ways that you could just like just win the game immediately. I think Annihilate is really offensive, but the thing is, the only way I set up Rage Fist is like Aurora Veil, slow setup, or just go for like maybe Icicle Spear, or maybe like Scale Shot with Crocodile. But otherwise, I don't really have an immediate way of like setting up the Annihilate, maybe like coaching stuff from Cinderace. But yeah, like it does take my team a little bit of time to get going. And I think like that's kind of thing that hurts because I don't have that immediate offensive pressure that I think I lack on this draft. Otherwise, I think it's a super solid draft. Again, I want to shout outs to my boys NJ11 and Luca for helping me with this draft process and helping me decide the mons I want to get. But yeah, I think that's like the one weakness I'd say, like the one criticism I do have on my draft is specifically like it doesn't have like a really oppressive mode, and does take maybe like a turn or two to really get going, where I don't have it like immediately off the bat in a lot of cases. So that's why I do rank my team as second place. And then for number one, Joey and his LA Wakers. And if you don't know, Joey made some pretty big changes with 6 transactions. He had Meowstic Male originally, which got replaced by Comfey, Riolu that got replaced by Hisuian Sneasler, Rhyperior for Rhydon, Zebstrika for Jolteon. He told me so much he wanted to use Zebstrika in his initial draft, so sad to see, because he was like Zebstrika's the mon that inspired him to do VGC draft, and then he just dropped it. What a fraud. But Alola Mola got replaced for Lapras. Honestly, a good change. I think I don't even know if Lapras been brought really. Poltergeist for Chimecho, which I don't think we've seen Chimecho at all, but I think this draft is really solid. I think it's really solid. So what do I think makes it really good is obviously he has a really oppressive mons in our Archaludon and Basculegion specifically, because our Archaludon and Basculegion rain mode, yeah, superstar mons. Like the fact that he could have both female and male Basculegion on one team is also kind of unfair. It is kind of unfair. He gets so much. It basically is like he got 11 mods. It feels like he got 11 mods. The only bright side is he can't bring both male and female in the same game, but he has ways he can win immediately with the weather pressure. Obviously, there's going to be ways to counter it with like sunny day, other weather changers, and more. But I feel like in general, there's like ways to play it against it with Joey's draft. For instance, Rain Dance Greninja, something we've seen in Regulation H, is something he could do to counteract those strategies. And across the board, like I do think, again, he has like really good offense immediately. He has like a few different modes that he's very flexible with. The Comfey, he's been really creative. He brought like a super offensive Life Orb Calm Mindset against me. And then other sets like that floor healing, the ability to stick around, super impressive. I think the Basculegion plus our Archaludon, again, really offensive. He's been able to do like a lot of different sets with the Basculegion or Archaludon. The Pelipper he's been flexible with. I kind of wish he's used Greninja more, because he hasn't really used Greninja too much, and I think this mon's really good on this draft. I feel like he hasn't capitalized as much. I think there's like so much theory of what I think Greninja could do in general, so I think this mon is super underrated by him, but I think it can put in a ton of work. Sneasler, I'm not like, or Sneasel, I'm not a huge fan of. It's like whatever, but it's like okay, I suppose. It hasn't really done much work from what I've seen in the draft, so this is like one of the weaker points. Rhydon, access to Lightning Rod, could be a decent mon under Trick Room. Jolteon, I think we were able to see like the choice spec set really dominate against Aaron, and then it was pretty strong into me with the Fake Tears Focus Sash set. And then I don't think he's really brought Lapras or Chimecho, at least to this point. I don't know if he brought it against Shady Eater. So like his draft does have some weak points. He does have the Sui Sneasler, the Chimecho, and the Lapras, which have kind of been not the best for him. Like, but I do think his main mode are just so solid with what they can do, because he already has like Trick and Comfey, so he doesn't really need to Chimecho as much. I think like his main rain mode is already really tough to prepare for, because they're like just super flexible with what they could do, and he has immediate offensive pressure. He has different ways he can set up. I think this is probably the top tier draft if I'm not mistaken. Like overall, I'd say my 10 mons are probably like better if you include like all the mons, but I think his 7 of his main mons are like way more, or I guess 7 or 8, probably 7 against Sneasel. I'm still like not convinced by, but like his initial 7 is really hard to prep for depending on like what he brings. And even Sneasel can decently be a threat, I suppose. Doesn't get Dire Claw thankfully, but I do think it does have some pressure. So I think it's like initial 8, because I don't think we've seen these two, as I said before, really good. But yeah, I think my 10 is better than his 10 when we account for all 10 mods, but I think his 8 puts on a lot more pressure than like my initial mods, because he has like immediate offense. He has ways he can set up a slower end game. He has different forms of speed control. He has some pretty good speed tiers with what he could do, especially with adaptability, basculation, or just a simple choice like the Swift Swim sets. And yeah, like he has quite a bit that he could go for in general. So I think it overall as a rounder, it might not be as the strongest, but I think what it does do, I think like really does well, which is why I put Joey's as first in my tier list. And that is the Wolfey Draft League tier list. Again, these are all my opinions based on what happened in the regular season. We haven't played playoffs. This is not the final standings. This is just my opinion of like whose draft was the strongest in the draft league and how I would rank them based on specifically how the drafts came out, like the actual teams themselves. But I did account for like a bit of the coaching experience, right? Like overall, these weren't the final standings or anything, but I did think that these are how I would rank the drafts based on how I've seen the coaches use their tools and how well, like in general, I think the teams can do and like what their potential is, like how well rounded are they in general. This is my tier list. So let me know your thoughts on the comments down below and let me know what you think. Do you think got it right, got it wrong? Who do you think is going to claim the victory in the Wolfey Draft League? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, it's kind of coincidence that because it's me versus Mount and then Joey versus Wolf in playoffs. So kind of funny with like how it lined up. But again, this is how I would rank the teams. Again, I haven't played playoffs. I don't think Joey or Wolf has played either to my knowledge. So yeah, this is again my opinion on how I would rank the teams specifically, not how the results came out, how I rank the teams. Let me know if you would want to see me react to the other side of the Wolfey Draft League, if I react to the other semifinals, and if I don't make finals, do I react to the finals? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you around next time.